27th from 4 to 8 p.m. at 11 Wheeler Road. Wine and malt beverage. McKinley Wilmot family on June 2nd from 1 to 8 p.m. at 269 Monument Street. Wine and malt beverage. And 5 for Barrel Farm on May 14th, July 26th, August 23rd, and September 24th, and the 5th one is October 20th. They vary from 10 to 2 p.m. on May the 14th, 6 to 8 p.m. on July 26th and August 23rd, 4 to 7 p.m. on September 24th, and 6 to 8 p.m. on October 20th, and congratulations to Barrel Farm for being very forward-looking in their application for one-day licenses. A Sunday entertainment license for the Concord Orchestra on May 2nd from 1 to 5 p.m. at 51 Walden Street, and the tour guide license renewals.
I move to approve the consent agenda as read.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Next order of business is the election of a new board chairperson and clerk. I would entertain nominations for clerk.
I'll do that. I would nominate Tom McKean as clerk for the select board this year.
Is there a second?
Second.
Are there any other nominations? All those in favor of?
Is it for clerk?
It is
Just
for,
clerk, okay.
For clerk, yes.
No.
No other nominations? All those in favor of Mr. McCain's nomination to be clerk of the select board, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Good, of course. Thank you and congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Mr. Rain?
I move to appoint Jane Hotchkiss as chair of the select board.
Second.
Any other nominations? All those in favor?
Aye.
Congratulations, Madam Chairperson.
This is an august seat. Sounds like it's my meeting. I think it's the next order of business is town manager's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Work began last week on the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, but it's happening in earnest now, particularly in the Old Marlboro Road section of the trail. The tree removal is happening. We did receive a request from a Williams Road resident that work be delayed until after July 1st due to bird nesting and other wildlife issues. So I'll be discussing that with Delia and Marcia later this week. The Public Works Department will be closing Strawberry Hill Road for a portion of the day on Thursday, May 11th, to remove 2 very large hazardous trees, about 48 inches in diameter, but they're both at risk of blowing over in a strong wind. So they'll be closing the road to remove those trees. The drop-off swap-off event went ahead on Saturday despite the weather. 894 cars visited, so there was a decent turnout. It's a little lower than normal, but it turned out to be a nice day. And
So the swap-off happened?
the drop-off happened.
Right, that's what I...
The swap-off was
Is that going to happen, get rescheduled?
I'm sorry, I don't know what the plan is for
Yeah, we're going to have an early one on Friday.
And it was
We had to cancel that.
raining quite hard.
No. The fall will be robust.
The Public Works Department expects to file the environmental notification form for the Cambridge Turnpike project, which have major wetlands impacts and so forth, and they're still optimistic that permits will be issued in the fall and construction starting late in the fall. Finally, Emerson Umbrella will be appearing tomorrow night before the Planning Board to discuss the partial demolition and new construction. Planning Board will be making a recommendation to the Board of Appeals on the special permit application. So I'll be talking with Jerry Wedge probably later this week also on that. And that's all I have.
Okay, so now we have the treat of welcoming our this year's amazing slate of tour guides. Here's Steve, I'm sorry, Jane. I'm working at takes a Jane and miss a Jane.
It's well, I'm very delighted to present to you the latest group of tour guides for the town of Concord. They have completed a class that began the day after, or the Monday after President's Day, and included 8 classroom sessions, and developing a whole interpretive project and several field trips and many other ancillary things, and they've all done a wonderful job. And I would like, if possible, to be able to read their names and have them stand and be recognized. Wonderful, thank you. Bonnie Baudet. Shelley Belton is not able to be here tonight. She's in South Africa. Andrea Hubbard Nelson. Dave King. Jacqueline Clough. China Lemire. Billion Lee. Elizabeth Martin. Barbara Olson. Sylvia Sawyer. Pete Seymour. Jim Sherblum. And John Simpson. That is our group.
We just need some sunny weather.
We need some sunny weather, but these people are prepared to be rain or shine. And this, I should mention that this is a course that was done through Concord Carlisle Adult and Community Education, as it has been for many decades.
So I'm curious where some of you have come from. I know it's not often just Concord residents who are going through this whole training process.
And several of these people are working already at sites in Concord, so maybe you can let people know.
Yeah, I'm Barbara Olson. I live in Arlington, but I spend a lot of time in Concord. And I work, or have for several years, at the Thoreau Farm doing tours. And if anybody that hasn't been there, we're open on the weekends, so be sure to get to it.
Oh, I'm Jackie Clough. I'm from Philadelphia originally. Now live in Newton, and I've been an interpreter at Walden Pond State Preservation. This will be my 3rd year.
What language?
Oh, so yeah, you know, John Henley asked me the same question. The interpreters, yeah, I was gonna say, if you didn't know, the interpreters at the parks interpret the historical, ecological, and cultural resources, so it's not a language. Yeah. It's the Walden Woods language, right? Yeah.
Thoroughvian, you speak
Do we
Thoroughvian.
Yes,
have other languages?
Huh?
Do we have guides who speak other
We
languages?
actually don't. There is some interest in. Oh. Yeah. So I mean, I'm just saying, not hired at Walden, but yeah.
And I'm Jim Sherblum, just a 31-year resident of the town.
I'm Andrea Hubbard Nelson. I'm a resident of Concord.
Dave King, resident of Carlisle.
So I'm from across the pond, so I'm representing the sort of European British angle on things.
You speak the part.
And I'm from England originally, but just moved here in August last year from California.
I'm China Lemire. I work full-time for the Thoreau Society. I live in Nashua, so I make that commute.
I'm Bonnie Baudet, and I live in Littleton.
I'm Billion Lee. I'm Concord resident for 18 years. And I came from mainland China, so I can influence Chinese.
John Simpson, I've been a resident for 17 years.
And I'm Pete Seymour, and I live over in Westford, and I'm currently a volunteer guide at the Minuteman National Park. I do some of the ranger talks over there.
And Shelley, who couldn't be here, is in South Africa where she's from, just visiting relatives.
You know, it's always so amazing to me to know that there are so many people willing to go through the arduous training to become certified and then to donate your time to our community, whether you live here or not. So we really appreciate this.
Absolutely.
How many guides in all?
I actually don't know. Andrew might be the man to answer that question.
Right now, I think we've had 70 people submit for renewals. There was 13 new ones, and there's still some other people who called in today and said, "Oh, hey, I forgot." So, you'll have more. Incredible. Yeah, next agenda will be a couple of stragglers. So.
Do I hear a motion?
Yes, I'd be honored to move to approve new tour guide licenses for guides as listed on the letter dated May 8th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
For taking out the whole arduous training and donating your time to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Your parts and stuff now.
You can stay if you like.
You'll learn more about Concord. The next item on the agenda is to amend the seating plan for outdoor seating, Main Street Market.
Dave's here, he's just in the hall.
Just gonna get it. Everybody get back in.
I'm always amazed that people get to, residents are not residents.
I can't take it.
You're on.
Yeah.
Welcome. So we look forward to hearing.
My name is David Anderson. I own the Main Streets Cafe, and I'm asking to have 16 seasonal seats in the alleyway alongside our building. That's about it. No alcohol.
No alcohol. And will that increase the total number of seats?
No.
So it'll drop by 16 inside?
Correct.
Ah,
The weather permitting.
Exactly.
Have you done this before?
I've gone before the board.
No, put seating out.
We have 2 tables and 4 chairs right along since we've opened, but we want to increase it with the nice alleyway that's there.
It's been reviewed by the building department, Lori Lavoli, and other town officials, no problem. The alley is owned by the town, so they would need to have a license from the town manager if the board approves you're the last stop.
Was HTC required to chime in on this?
Yep, they reviewed and approved the design of the table and chairs.
Okay. Thank you.
Picture of it.
Yeah.
right.
So I just have a curiosity question.
Sure.
Oftentimes in the summer, I see bikes, a lot of bikers come through town and they hang up their bikes right outside there. Is there another combination where bikers are gonna put their bikes? They usually come, they park their bikes and go inside, they eat.
Generally, the bikes that you see there are expensive ones. They don't go far from their.
That's true.
They all over the alley, anywhere they can.
Where they can put it.
Just wherever's convenient. But all the way down, right down to the
Yeah.
55 stop.
And are those picnic tables in the far back, are those also yours?
The tables are ours, but it was an agreement with the town that we maintain them and allow other people to use.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
These tables in the alley will be proprietary in the sense they're just for your patrons.
For service, yes. But there's plenty of other options in the alley.
Any other questions?
No.
Motion.
Okay, do I have a motion?
I move to amend the seating plan for Main Street Market and Cafe to allow up to 16 seasonal seats to be located in the alleyway. The amount of indoor seating must be reduced by the amount of seasonal seating as there is no change to the previously approved amount of seating. No alcohol is to be consumed in the 16 seasonal seats. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great photo, good.
Well, I think we are past 7:10, so right on time for our 7:10 public hearing on the change of manager. for the Marriott Residence Inn, 320 Baker Ave.
Move to open the public hearing.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Hello, my name is Rashi Manglik. I'm with McDermott, Quilty and Miller, representing Cohen Management. We're here on a simple change of manager of record hearing. I have with me Jason Rayner. He has several years of experience in the industry. He's the proposed manager of record. So he has almost 10 years of experience working with alcohol beverage services, training people in the same, as well as almost a year in the actual Residence Inn in Concord. He's also TIPS trained, and we feel like he'll be a great addition to this manager of record. And if you have any other questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
So this is a recommendation for a change of manager, not alternate manager, is that right?
Exactly. There's no change to the alternate manager.
No, I'm sorry?
No change to the alternate manager. You want to keep that as my goal.
So I'm curious, you have not been open all that long, right?
We opened in September of last year.
Right.
Yes.
Is it uncommon to change managers of record
So
frequently? It seems like it's less than a year old.
Right, totally. And when we had presented last year, we had kind of mentioned that because it's a new operation, often you're just training people, getting into the grain of what's happening and who would be best for the position. And so, they trained one person and then thought that Jason would actually be a better fit. So then that kind of changeover happens, and it's pretty regular actually for a new business.
Okay.
I know this has been vetted by the police, and so that's all clear and set.
And the application's complete in order. Yes.
Okay. No further questions?
So I move, should we see if there are any questions from the public? Hearing none.
I move to close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so,
I move to approve Jason Raymore as manager of record at Cowan Management Incorporated, doing business as Residence Inn by Marriott Concord, located at 320 Baker Avenue. The manager must be engaged in the actual management of the licensed premises as his main occupation, and must be present on the licensed premises for not less than 30 hours per week during the hours when alcoholic beverages are sold.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome to Concord.
Thank you.
Now we're on to our second public hearing. Change of beneficial interest, new stockholder for Crosby's Market, 2011 Sudbury Road. Welcome.
Good evening.
I move to open the hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Basically two.
Can you identify yourself for the
James
record?
Crosby, 211 Sudbury Road, own and operate Crosby's Marketplace.
Thank you.
Been in Concord 37 years at this point in time. But there's been two changes really in our family business that essentially require us to make some changes and amendments to stay current with the town of Concord and with the ABCC. The first event was the death of our son, which was the, excuse me, summer before last, actually due to cancer. And David was the present treasurer of our company. Essentially, his stock, via the purchase, the stockholders agreement, we buy back the voting stock, and his regular stock goes into a trust, the David Crosby Trust, for the beneficiary of his wife and 12-year-old twins. He's been replaced, voted for a younger brother, Christopher Crosby, has taken over as the president and treasurer of Crosby's Markets. And I'm going back on the board as a non-stockholder. Seeing my wife and I gave away everything a few years ago, but I'm still on the board. The second event requiring change is a merger. We have a third son that made more sense to just have one company. Basically, an exchange of stock was done, to consummate that, and Michael, that son, also was appointed as a director. So basically, there's really a change of officer, there's a change in director, and I'm going back on the board. My son Michael is now on the board, and then essentially the changes in beneficial interests and the issuance of stock that sort of follow that through. So.
Well, first, I'm sorry for your loss.
Yes, thank you.
So the two new directors are you and Michael.
That's correct.
Right. And this has been reviewed by chief of police and everybody else?
The application's complete, in order.
It is.
Any questions? No.
Difficult reasons to restructure and reorganize a family business, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it takes a little time.
Any comments, questions from the board? How about the public?
I move to close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. I move to approve the application from Crosby's Market Incorporated, doing business as Crosby's Marketplace, located at 211 Sudbury Road, for the changes in beneficial interest to add new stockholders, Michael J. Crosby, James G. Crosby, and David A. Crosby Revocable Trust, and to add new directors, Michael J. Crosby and James G. Crosby.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
And now to our 7:20 public hearing. Transfer of an all-alcoholic beverages license for Bond Beer Concord LLC, doing business as Bond Beer Concord, to Fiorella Moore LLC, doing business as Fiorella's Concord, 24 Walden Street. Do I hear a motion?
I move to open the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm Henry Dane, and I am here to represent Genevieve Carrion, the owner of the applicant Fiorella Moore LLC. I know that you're, given the circumstances, you're probably going to have a lot of questions, and there may be some discussion, but I'd just like to start out by saying I assume that the application is in order and you have all the documentation that is required. All the notices have been returned and the publication has been made.
Yeah, for the transfer, it doesn't require a notification to the abutters, but the notification is published on the paper.
So we're all set on the formalities. What we're asking for is the transfer of the all-alcoholic beverage license, which is currently held by Bond Beer Concord LLC. The pledge of the stock in the buyer to Cambridge Savings Bank, the approval of John Gallagher as statutory manager, and the approval of the common victualer's license, which is a separate matter, not a ABCC matter, but is usually considered at the same time. I think the best way to start out is for me to introduce Ms. Carrion and to have her tell her story about her involvement in this transaction and in this license.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here in front of you all. Being in Concord...
I just ask you to identify yourself and state your address.
Oh, yes. My name is Genevieve Carrion, owner and creative director of Fiorella's, 187 North Street in Newtonville, Massachusetts. My story is that my husband and I have built together what is now today Fiorella's. And my husband opened up the restaurant in years ago when he was 23 years old. And I came into the picture 3 years after that. Now, my background is in branding, graphic design, and I specialize in creating identities and branding and creating overall experiences. So we were the perfect pieces of different parts of the puzzle. My husband is the cook, and I'm the visionary and the creative director. So when I came into the picture, I thought, wow, his food is excellent, but he needs help with the overall vision and the bigger picture, and basically our mission and giving Fiorella's a solidified brand. And so that's where I came in. And I've had a ton of experience in branding. When I graduated university, I was fortunate to win a competition, a very coveted competition in California, where I won first place in something called Portfolio Review. So this catapulted my career, and I got to work with top branding professionals and designers nationwide, and I really got immersed working 20-hour days in what it is to be a brand and what it is to create an experience. So where I think that our restaurant is unique is that every day we try to infuse magic into the experience. Fiorella's is a gem. The food is excellent. And what I do is look at every single detail. No detail is not looked at and paid meticulous attention to. And we have seen over the years families grow before our eyes over the past 17 years. It's a family-style restaurant inspired by Italy, hospitality from the heart. Everything I personally do in my life is about providing an experience and providing warm hospitality from the heart. And we feel as though we could add so much to the Concord fabric and to the culture of the community. Within Fiorella's, we have created a very strong culture. All our employees are family to us, and everybody's happy. And we have an amazing team of people. We have over 120 employees. And we are very fortunate to work with such talented people. So Fiorella's, in essence, has been a collaboration of love between my husband and I, sharing our different skills. And we recently had a daughter 6 months ago, so I'm a new mother. And I thought that this would be a brilliant opportunity, an example to show her that, her parents can be strong together, but also strong individually. And that's something that I strive for, because it's something that my parents instilled in me to be strong as a couple, but also to be able to be independent as well. And so that's the example that I want to set for my daughter. And I really hope that we are able to be part of the Concord community. We absolutely love it here. When I first found out that there was an opening in the Bondia space, the moment I walked in, I whispered to my husband, I said, "Where can we sign? This is my dream. This is what I have been looking for." The existing space is so exquisite. And I think we could bring that warmth and long-lasting memories to the community of Concord, and it would be an honor and a pleasure.
Thank you.
Sure.
Would you like to talk a little bit more about the role you intend to play?
Oh, absolutely. So I am the owner, and essentially I'm the visionary. I am the person who helps create the menu items, who helps create the culture. I am the one who is the navigator of Fiorella's and the brand, and I'll be very involved, and with the help of our amazing staff. So,
well, the important issue here is that we have set up a new legal entity of which Mrs. Carrion is the sole owner, and all of the documentation that you have in the application is consistent with that. We have the issues with the licensing involve providing for the public need, and for endorsing the location, which has been a bar and restaurant for as long as I can remember, of showing that there's a need which is demonstrated by the existence of that establishment, Bondier's and the Golden Grill before it, and the suitability of the applicants. The applicants clearly have the necessary experience. The report of the Concord Police Department raises no issues about the background of Ms. Carrion, about the LLC, which is going to be the licensee, or about Mr. Gallagher, who is going to be the statutory manager. The only issue is the one that I think which was raised by the document which I received about 4 o'clock this afternoon, although I had some indication of what the bottom line was going to be, that there is the issue of the attribution of ownership to a husband, because the husband, that is Ms. Carrion's husband, had formally applied for this license, and because of some issue in his past history, which is outlined in detail in the memo that you have from the police chief, required that we withdraw the original application that was made in his name. So there is a supposition that somehow that
They were not married at the time of the incident with the husband?
They were not.
No.
And how long have you been married?
It'll be 10 years this year.
And
yes.
The incident was 23
Yes.
years ago.
Yeah.
Obviously it was an unfortunate incident. It was something that was not known actually to Mr. Carrion, because he had pulled Corey reports on himself, and it didn't show up for him, as it didn't show up initially to Detective Harrington when he investigated. But there was some, I'm going to call it a mix-up in the court records by the spelling of the name and so on. But that's a fact from the past. It is his history, and it disqualifies him at this point to be a licensee, but it does not disqualify his wife.
And it was 22 years ago, so that's a...
But it doesn't disqualify his wife, because if a woman would be disqualified because her husband was not qualified to hold a license, that would certainly be a ridiculous and unfair, and not a result that would be in keeping with the current ideas about the genders.
Well, I must say, my feeling is that if it had occurred within the last 10 years during the marriage, I would look at it quite differently than something that occurred 22 years ago, well before the marriage.
The kid was in college at the time. And so so I think the conclusion that is, I have to say, I have the greatest respect for Chief O'Connor and for Keith Harrington. I just think that they're probably better cops than they are lawyers, that's all, that's fine. But the conclusion that they reach is that, based on no facts at all, is that that Mr. Carrion is an undisclosed co-owner in the business. There are no documentation which in any way supports that. They cite a case which I saw again in these papers for the first time this afternoon, which was a far more egregious case. It involved the Tecci family, and probably, I don't know if it was the same establishment. It was Joe Tecci's, where there were still bullet holes in the wall when I first came to Boston. But this was a case where an application failed, and they put it in the name of a son-in-law, and George Tecci still remained as the treasurer of the new corporation. He handled all the money, he wrote all the checks. Everybody, when investigators talked to his friends, they said, oh yeah, George has a new place. And when they asked the son-in-law, if you own an interest in this business, he said, who was the statutory licensee, he said, no, the only thing I own is a barbershop in Cambridge. So the fact that, I don't think that case gives you the basis on which to attribute ownership of a husband in a business that is owned by the wife. And
is it ownership that's the issue, or benefit from ownership?
It is ownership. Well, if there's I mean, if you went by the fact that a husband and wife share certain assets among themselves, it would mean that it would never be possible for one spouse to hold a license if the other spouse were not qualified. And that's not a result that would be, I think, supported by any court today. But the thing is that when the husband applied, nobody asked any questions about the background of his wife. But when his wife applies, the background of the husband becomes...
Well, it had been flagged because the husband had applied. So I think that's a false argument.
Absolutely.
You own how many other restaurants?
There's 5 total. There's 3 express versions, and then 1 main restaurant in Newton. So 4 total.
And those are all in your name?
No, they're not currently.
And the one in Newton is the only one that serves alcohol? Because
Yes.
That's the crux of this conversation.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
It is.
Are we ready to hear from the chief or anyone else? Chief O'Connor? It's being discussed anyway.
Good evening, I'm Joseph O'Connor, I'm Chief of Police here in Concord. And as you have in front of you, I did make a recommendation to deny based on the facts that are in that report. I don't think the circumstances, the past background are in dispute, although I think counsel would characterize them a little differently than I, but I certainly have respect for his position. But I think if you do look at the previous application, the timeline that was put forward, and the beneficial interest that I believe, I just listened to Mrs. Garing talk about the close relationship they have in their other business. It raised concern for my licensing officer, Detective Harrington, who was here. I also had another sergeant, Sergeant Jeffrey Young, review that as well. And in my own conclusion, I came that I thought it was appropriate to recommend to deny the license based on the information that I had.
Have you seen the docket sheets for these charges?
My detective has reviewed the...
And I'm just surprised because one of the charges, they're all in the district court. One of the charges the district court wouldn't have jurisdiction over. So I'm just curious as to sort of what in fact happened, whether there was a reduction or whether And one of the charges in the marijuana case, which I believe in today's world would be not considered.
I'm not sure that we were really in a position.
Well, I don't get too much, right, but I mean, one of the charges would not have, another charge, the district court wouldn't have jurisdiction. So I'm a little bit confused, frankly.
Well, I believe if you do look in the report, it will distinguish what was involved. I don't think it would be appropriate for me to.
Right, no, I appreciate that. I didn't know how much had been looked into on this.
Well, we have read the police reports from the city that it occurred, and we are aware of what
Well, let me add, the chief is aware that the record of Mr. Carrion has been absolutely clean ever since that time. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Not that it's relevant, because he has no ownership interest in the applicant. And it's a genuine separation. I know the sequence.
Mr. Dane, I'm very sympathetic to Tom's notions that this was a long time ago. But I'm not very sympathetic to the notion of characterizing no interest, particularly after a previous application was withdrawn and simply resubmitted by Ms. Carrion.
No, but the way we saw it was that the fact that we discovered that he was not qualified gave us an opportunity and gave the Carrions the opportunity to, in fact, establish a woman-owned business, which is somewhat unusual in the restaurant industry. And it was maybe, we see it as a gift, really, because it truly is hers. And all of the documentation supports it, and there is no intention to change any of that. It's.
Why wasn't it put forward like that in the first place then? If
it was more
such a really great idea.
Probably inertia. The assumption that if something is owned, it belongs to a man. Those kinds of ideas still prevail.
Well, I'm the first one to support women-owned businesses, and but I do want to just reflect back on the description of the partnership and the vision of the partnership that you and your husband share. Because when you described your engagement with him from the start,
right?
It has been as a fully joint, and that's wonderful.
Yeah.
But that's a different approach than what Mr. Dane has described.
Well, it's not a matter that this man is of bad character and will be a bad influence on the business. There's a technical requirement here. And so if he is disqualified on the basis of a technical requirement, which, by the way, in their 2014 annual report, the ABCC recommended that disqualification be eliminated from the statute, and that the ABCC be given discretion to evaluate the background.
That didn't happen, did it?
It did not happen, but the ABCC wanted it, but it shows what their attitude for this. But it's not as though the guy's a gangster and a crook and he's going to run gambling out of the restaurant. There's a technical requirement which disqualifies him. So we're entitled to have set up a business in a technical way that avoids that problem. It's all right to deal with it that way. If the law has a requirement that we don't meet, we can do it in a different way, and there's nothing wrong with that. We're not getting away with anything.
Chris, can I ask a question of you? Have you had an opportunity to consult with our counsel regarding this matter?
I did not. Chief O'Connor did late in the day today, but I have not had an opportunity to speak with Mina Macarius.
And Chief, was there anything that we learned from that discussion, or is it something that needs more review by town council?
I feel that my recommendation after speaking with town council was on on solid ground to make that recommendation. Certainly, the board could deliberate further on that and get advice from council as well.
That's what we should do.
Yeah, I think, yeah. It would give me comfort to know that we've discussed this.
Right.
After we have heard from anyone else who wants to talk, and
Yeah.
if we close the public hearing, I'm going to move that we postpone action on this item. Chris?
I would just say, if you are going to postpone action, I wouldn't close the hearing, I'd continue the hearing.
Right.
What would you ask council?
I want to ask,
What do you
make
need to
sure,
know?
well, I want to hear from council whether this is technical, and whether the action of submitting one application and withdrawing and resubmitting is his view is an attempt to circumvent this action or not, and to make sure that we're on solid grounds if we would decide to deny the license, or if we approve the license, what happens if it is overturned by the state. So I think I'd just like to have a conversation with council about that.
Those are good questions.
No prejudice intended here. I hear Mr. Dane's argument. I've heard the owner. I understand it, but I think we want to make sure we're acting as carefully as we can in this matter.
There's one thing that you may need to consider in that, if you go down that road. The statute requires that you make your decision within 30 days of the date on which the application was filed. The application was filed on, is it April 20th? And that 30-day period expires on Wednesday of this week.
No time to consult with council.
And and if there were the opportunity, and I don't think this is like the Board of Appeals where the applicant has the opportunity to consent to a waiver of that. I would think that, as I would read the statute, if you took any action beyond the expiration of 30 days, that would be considered probably a denial by default. I'm sorry about that. If this issue had come up sooner, or that there had been the opportunity to consult earlier, we could have dealt with this.
So the application we're referencing is your application in April? Is that not the original app?
This file was filed April 20th.
April
Yeah.
20th, this is the date on application.
So if we review the application today, make a decision, say it's not in support of this application, does it continue on to the ABCC?
I think they can
Only if we appeal.
appeal the decision.
And as a practical, there are practical matters here, and that is that our arrangements with the sellers and the landlords and so on are time limited. And if we have to go through appeals or go through reapplications, I think the opportunity for these people to take over that restaurant, which has now been vacant and closed since the end of March, will have disappeared. And that restaurant will stay vacant probably for many months going forward, which would be, I think it would be a loss to the town.
Well, having Bondier closed was a loss for the town, that's for sure.
Yes. And it was a community asset, and I think it should be, I think these are wonderful people to take that space over and to run that restaurant. And it'll be a long time before you find people like this.
What would happen, Mr. Dane, if the applicant decided to withdraw her application and refile it?
That would, and where, that would have two, first, I don't know what that would gain for us, other
It would
than
gain for us the
the time.
opportunity to talk to council.
It would, that gets us another probably 2 months down the road, and I don't think we can hold the deals together for that long.
Well, we would have advice from council within the next meeting in 2 weeks.
You could.
Yeah.
Is this. Because of the 30-day limitation, the statute says that you must either grant or dismiss the application within 30 days. And if you fail to act, and either from the date of notice of your failure, notice of your dismissal, or your failure to act, I have 5 days to file an appeal with the ABCC. And if we go beyond that 35th day.
But the question is, if you withdrew it and reapplied, the timetable, the 30-day period would begin upon the reapplication.
That's right.
There wouldn't have to be an appeal, we wouldn't have to take an action. So the question would be, what is the disadvantage? It gives us 2 weeks, you'd have a decision in 2 weeks. And so you're really just talking about a method in which we would be able to get legal input.
While Mr. Dane is thinking.
Yes, so you can see the smoke coming out of my ears.
Think for another minute or so. The other thing that we could do, I suspect we would be able to get opinion from council pretty quick.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, what I was thinking is.
One second. So another option, although it causes us a little inconvenience, is that if we would just have a special meeting
just
for this matter.
Sometime next week.
On Wednesday.
2 or 3, well.
I don't think we can make it by Wednesday this week.
But let's not worry about when it is, let's see if.
Yeah, within the 5-day post.
Within the next few
35
days.
between now and the Friday.
Right. So that we could convene here and sometime very quickly, and that'd be the only agenda item.
If it's a refiling, there'd have to be a mailing of notices to abutters.
No, I was suggesting that if we asked them to withdraw, that was one approach. The other approach is we just continue the public hearing until
May 17th or some day.
Monday.
Right.
I don't know what day it is, but Monday. Or as soon as we think we could get an opinion, we could get our calendar squared away.
But you're past his Wednesday deadline for.
Wait, the Wednesday deadline, I thought the deadline was May 22nd, May 20th. May 20th is on Saturday, May 17th is on the Wednesday. So I think that we have the opportunity to meet before May 20th on a Saturday.
It's 30 days, right?
30 days.
Right? From April 20th.
From April 20th, so if we met next Monday, for example.
We'd be within that window.
At 7 o'clock, we'd be within your 30-day window.
Do you have the, I want to make sure that we have the right date for that.
That's for all alcoholic beverage
Filed on the
licenses.
20th, the ad was sent the 21st,
Okay,
it's run the 27th.
It's the
Which
20th.
is 11 days from that, so we have this hearing now, so we gotta get 21 days or something now?
Oh, wait, this is dated the 20th, but we received it when?
On the 20th?
April 20th, the ad was sent to the paper on the 21st to be published on the 27th, Thursday, the 27th, in the Concord Journal. This hearing tonight is 11 days after
The publication.
After publication, which falls within the required timeline, because you can't open the hearing within 10 days of being published.
If we.
So, about 1 week, I think we're at 19 days, I believe,
11,
since it was filed.
11 and 19, I believe that we can stay within the 30 days.
So, and how was our schedule for next Monday? I don't even know what day.
That'll be Monday the 15th.
Chris?
Both the chief and I will be out of town next Monday, but I'm sure you can do this without us.
Yeah, I will be unavailable.
You back on the 16th? Or are you guys off to some conference? More or less. Well,
17th?
We have heard what the chief has to say, though, and we have a written statement from the
Right.
chief.
Yep.
This is getting
If you
council.
have any additional input, you can certainly provide it to the committee.
At this point, I think it's a policy question about what the board feels comfortable with and given town
I
council's
personally feel
opinion.
like we should get advice from town council. That's why we have town council, to advise us in sticky situations. And I think we can establish a date next week when we can reconvene this.
How's the 15th,
So
I can't do the 15th.
16th?
I can do both.
Steve,
I can do the 16th.
What time?
what time do you want?
7?
Okay.
The 7 on the 13th,
16th.
16th at 7.
16th
16th at
at
7.
7. Okay.
Okay?
Do you think it would be helpful to have town council be present?
Well,
I think we can ask town council that question.
So that if there's some,
Yeah, if
In this room here?
if we can
Is that
do
okay?
that.
Let me confirm that right now, when everybody's here.
and to the extent that it has any value in terms of the procedure, if the applicant can consent to that continuance, we do so.
Well, with all due respect, the applicant doesn't need to consent.
Well, but if it helps, we do. If it doesn't help, we still do.
Shall we see if there's anybody in the public that wishes to comment before we continue?
Room's
this?
available.
Okay. Public, come to the microphone and be recognized.
Good evening. Jason Bond, I own Bondier Concord LLC. Again, for what it's worth, I've had the restaurant on the market for about a year, and we've talked to many potential buyers, groups and individuals, and the carrions, to me, were the most suited towards continuing our goals in Concord, which was to provide something nice for the town. And they really struck me because there are a couple who've run a successful business and built it over 16 years. And, they're not a group, they're people who are actually going to care about it and be present. And that was important to me. And, they weren't even the highest offer we've had, but they were the people who I thought would be best to take care of the people of Concord in that space. So they have my full support, and I think I was really lucky to find a couple of people like them to take over that space. So, Ramon, again, for whatever it's worth, if it has import, even though he's not on the license, professionally he is very well respected. He's on the board of the Massachusetts Restaurant Association. He's well known in my accountant and legal circles. Just he's a known person. He's respected. He's built strong businesses, and that's what he's known for. So that's all I have to say. So, thank you.
I find that very helpful.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And I just want you to know that, I speak for myself, this isn't personal. We just want to make sure we do it right.
Right.
And will that slight delay till next Tuesday
Affect anything?
to keep things together?
That's a workable time frame for us. Yeah.
And we'll make a judgment that night.
Right.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, I move that we close the public hearing.
Continue
the public hearing.
to
Until
Next
Tuesday, May 16th at 7 PM
in the
in the select board room.
Thank you.
second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So, keep wanting to close the public hearing, and yet. Now, I think the next one up would be Ms. LaFleur. We have a discussion? Something exciting to report?
Well, and she's deferring to me, I think, but Kerry, we're talking about the appointment of the town clerk. Town clerk, per the town charter, is the appointment of the town manager subject to the confirmation or approval of the select board. The town clerk reports to the finance director and has for many years, so I know the board wanted to hear the process that we went through to recruit the replacement for long-serving Anita Techley.
Hey, good evening. I'm Carrie LaFleur. I'm the finance director. So we advertised the position back in January. We advertised statewide in a couple of different publications. We had 34 applicants for the position. I did the initial screening of the applicants. We set them, or divided them up into 3 groups based on qualifications and experience. We interviewed all of the candidates that were in the first group. That was 6 applicants. We had 2 different interviews. Both were panel interviews. The first one was a panel made up of staff members. We had Elizabeth Hughes, the town planner, Carrie Cronin, the library director, Dan Rowley, the highway superintendent, and myself. After the interviews, we reviewed notes and we picked 3 candidates to move forward to the second round of interviews. That was, the second round was conducted with the town manager, with the IT director, Mark Howell, former town moderator, Ned Perry, and myself. And again, after the interview, we compared notes, and the results were the same as the first. Both panels selected the same candidate as being the preferred candidate, and that candidate is Kari Tari. She currently serves as the town clerk for the town of Westford. She's been in that position since 2001, and prior to that she served as Concord's assistant town clerk for 4 years. So many of the employees here still know her from her previous service. We had members on both panels who actually knew her as well. She is very well respected in her field. She has particular knowledge in records management, which is something that we feel that we could improve upon here. Our big IT funding that we had approved at town meeting, I think the second big improvement we'd like to make is in the records management area. So that was something that was of particular interest. And I'd be happy to answer any questions on the process.
Well, Mr. Lawson and I had the privilege of meeting with Ms. Terry. And so I would look to the rest of the board, see if there are any questions, or I know that you've had a chance to look at her resume.
Questions for me? Her resume is quite impressive. Having not met her, I rely on my colleagues who have had the opportunity to spend time with her to make their recommendations, but her resume is quite impressive. And actually, with the changes to the public records law, we probably could use some work on our records management. So that we can fully comply with the new laws. They're very odious.
I found her eminently qualified and pleasant, and I think she'll make a fine appointment. So congratulations to both of you for managing that process.
Great. And also I mentioned she had Andrew's job. She first came here and spent a year and a half in Andrew's position before becoming the assistant town clerk. So she knows.
So she's walked in many shoes. Yeah, it's important. Well, thank you.
So respectfully request your approval.
I move to confirm the town manager's appointment of Kari Tari as town clerk.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Great. Thank you very much. And she indicated she is available to start on May 30th?
May 30th, maybe a couple of days before.
Great. And we'll introduce you all to her when she starts. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Next up, I believe it's Chief Cotreau and MAPC. This is a discussion of our draft hazard mitigation plan. Looking forward to it.
Good evening. Mark Cotreau, the fire chief. Along with me is Ann Herbst from the MAPC. And Ann is our contractor from MAPC to help us with our Concord hazard mitigation plan. So in August of 2010, the Board of Selectmen approved our plan, and the plan was good for 5 years. And so with more than 5 years along. What happened early 15, they told us that we need to update our plan. So apparently the definition of update the plan is to pretty much do the plan. So so in the process of doing that, we were fortunate enough to have MAPC help us with this, and they were the same folks that helped us before, so we had a template to work with. We've had some meetings with a committee. We have a committee of various departments in town, and we're well on our way. We've had one public hearing at one of the planning meetings, and this would count as the second. And so Ann has a terrific PowerPoint presentation to show you and see what we've been up to.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, and thanks for a chance to get to talk to you tonight. And as the chief said, the FEMA, in its wisdom, really did sort of reorganize the plan completely. So did we. I'll try and make it fairly brief, but just go through the work that we've done. FEMA, as the chief said, FEMA does oversee the process, and they require a new plan every 5 years. And our job was really just to provide the technical assistance. And certainly feel free to ask me questions at any point. In 2000, Congress adopted the Federal Disaster Mitigation Act, and basically the goal was to work with communities to take proactive steps to address natural hazards. And the idea is basically to make communities more resilient, less vulnerable. And this will be the update to the existing plan. One of the key things to know about hazard mitigation plans is that they make the town eligible for FEMA hazard mitigation grants, and Concord has done a good job in the past taking advantage of those grants. So
we got some grant money when we had the hurricane or whatever, when all the damage was done within the last 6 months or so.
The tornado.
Yeah. No, we didn't get any. No, we didn't hit the benchmarks of those.
Mm-hmm.
What we've had is, with this type of funding, is the Spencer Brook at Westford Road culvert that was $55,000. Rich Rain said I may need these. So. Fitchburg Turnpike culvert replacement, which was $74,000, almost $75,000. And then the Lowell Road culvert drainage system replacement, and there's still some work there looking forward, but the total grant received was $506,000. Okay. So it's really, we've got quite an incentive to have this plan tucked away.
Thank you.
Great, okay. Again, it is a plan that focuses on natural hazards. There's other plans for chemical spills, other kinds of incidents. But before we had hazard mitigation plans, there was really no mechanism for looking in a comprehensive way at natural hazards. So flooding, I would say, is probably the most common, but we look at all kinds of hazards, including high winds, hurricanes, and tornadoes. In the past, I think we would have said tornadoes are highly unlikely, and that's probably still true, but it makes the case for planning and preparation, I think. Winter storms, very common. Earthquakes and landslides, again, very uncommon, very low probability, but not zero probability. Drought has also been uncommon, but again, we're just about, I think, out of our most recent drought, and that can be a cause of brush fires. So. Extreme temperatures, heat and cold, are also periodic issues, and certainly with climate projections, extreme heat may become more common as an issue. So here's FEMA's definition, basically to permanently reduce or prevent losses of life, injuries, and property damage by using long-term strategies. And really what we're looking at is what are we doing now, and what kinds of things might we be able to add in the future. I think the underlying reason that FEMA has adopted this program is that they saw this sort of ongoing cycle of disaster and rebuilding over and over again, sometimes rebuilding sort of identically and then losing your work again. So it's costly in terms of dollars, it's costly in terms of disruption and suffering at times. So we know we won't be stopping the storms, but we want to do what we can to be prepared for events. Process, our role is, MAPC's role is to provide technical assistance. As the chief said, we worked with a local team of town staff, and Chief Gautreaux chaired that group. And frankly, as a technical assistance provider, we really couldn't do anything meaningful without the town committee. They're the ones with the expertise and the knowledge, and I have to say I was grateful to work with a really terrific group. It was quite impressive. So we take the information from the committee and channel it into the particular format that FEMA requires. We populate the plan with the data that they require. As already mentioned, 2 public meetings are required. This will be the second one. I'll show it at the end, but the plan itself is on a link on the town website, so there's a review period. People can take a look. It's if you have any need a sleep aid, it might. And then I'll go into it in a little more detail, but the plan gets reviewed by both FEMA and MEMA. So again, looking at what goes into the plan, the main point is to identify hazards and to specifically map them to areas of town. So we start with higher level data that the state may provide and then incorporate local data. So we might look at river basins generally and floodplains, but then we look much more specifically at what kind of flooding have we seen here, because that isn't always in flood zones. It all goes onto a map in GIS and is digitized and can be available for other town uses, to fold into an open space plan or master planning process. So this shows you just some of the hazards that are mapped and how it ends up appearing on the plan. And as an example, as you might imagine, we spent some time looking at the flooding from March 2010 being really sort of the signature event of recent history. And while there's not a USGS gauge in Concord, we were able to use the one nearby. Again, also looking at the records of severe storms, geological hazards, they all have to be mapped for their frequency and severity. Mm-hmm. Oops, sorry. And then, probably most importantly, we document hazards that are identified by the team. So where have we seen flooding? And also, so primarily what was mapped for Concord was quite a few specific areas that have flooded and bridges where there are weight restrictions that could present an issue. Mm-hmm. We also look at patterns of future development. Basically, that it can only be a snapshot in time, so it's something you would be looking at again over time, but to get a sense of where we know development is going to be happening and what its status is relative to the flood zone. And one thing that town staff will certainly look at more carefully is sometimes a property is in the flood zone, but it doesn't mean the actual structure involved is in the flood zone. So that may, you can't really tell from that how, what level of concern you might have. And then we also go through a process of identifying all the critical facilities in town. So, obvious things like police and fire stations, but also gathering places where you might have populations in need of assistance. So nursing homes, hospitals, schools, places like that all get mapped onto here. And then inventoried to understand what their relation is to potential hazards. And then, of course, we go through a process of taking stock of what the existing mitigations measures are. So we look at them sort of by hazard. And one thing that is clear, and you probably know, is it's not as if we're starting at the beginning. There are plenty of programs and activities in place already. So this plan is really a matter of refining, adding new information. But many things are already well on their way. And so then finally the work of the committee is to really think about what should be new mitigation measures to plan for and think about and take on in the next 5 years. And you can see it's really, again, it's done by hazard, but it's quite a wide range from physical projects to open space acquisition to different kinds of planning and evaluation projects. For the first time, the plan does talk about climate impacts. That's not actually something required by FEMA, but I think it will be in the future, and it certainly will be in the state plan next time around. So, and again, more mitigation measures. Winter hazards, very typical. Drought, I think some of that people had more specific experience with, so had some thoughts about how to be better prepared. And then finally, in terms of the process, as I said, the plan's on the town website. We'll take comments through May 22nd from the public or anybody else. After that, we submit the plan to MEMA. They review it. They'll let us know if revisions are needed. They send it on to FEMA. FEMA will do a similar review. If they're satisfied, they issue what they call is an approval pending adoption notice, meaning that the content, they approve the content, and then the remaining procedural step is it actually comes back to you. We're not asking for action tonight. At the very end, we'll ask for, the select board needs to adopt it, and we'll provide the resolution for that. So, and then one other thing to remember is that it is meant to be a plan that is a living document that we don't forget about over the next 5 years. So the need to have some periodic review, particularly probably at the 3-year period. And then frankly, it takes a bit of time to review it. So already in year 4, you need to start getting ready for the next time around. And this is where people can find the plan on the website, and I'm happy to take any comments via email or otherwise. So also happy to take questions if you have any.
Just a question I had, it really is an extensive document. So the timing be late in the calendar year that we might expect to have this back here?
It's a little hard to predict. We have seen it take as long as that. The most recent history, which I don't guarantee, is that they've actually been faster. So generally, I think our experience has been if you know, if you're thinking about grants that are coming up soon or grant opportunities, there's usually some consideration given to the fact if it's been submitted, you know, they take that into account so that it's, I think you wouldn't be waiting for 6 months in order to be eligible.
But it could be a year before we're really back here.
Possibly,
And then if it's 6 months, the surprise is out.
Yes, or if it's, yes, conceivably, it can be.
Is there kind of a cost component to this, the recommendations, and then sort of what the recommendations might cost the town to implement?
There is, in a very general kind of high-low estimation. So I think that, you know, that's part of implementation is to start to think about how do things get funded and in what order and what are the priorities, those kinds of things.
Well, that's another point of timing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because town meeting has a warrant.
Yeah, they really, if you look through the plan, it really just says, you know, what the financial impact of that recommendation is, and it's really just high, low, or I think it's high, medium.
Medium, it's not.
Like that.
But they don't send money along to help us.
No, I didn't think they would.
So I'm curious that, I understand that this meets FEMA's interest and ours to be able to potentially access FEMA monies when we need them. Is there a change in FEMA's funding process that they would not fund something that we see as a vulnerability or a risk before disaster? I know we have a plan, so it gets us in the ranking that we have vulnerabilities in certain areas, but it appears that we're missing the vulnerability assessment of other areas that aren't currently known as flood hazards or...
Well, I mean, FEMA tends to do pre- and post-disaster funding. So this actually puts you in the queue for pre-disaster funding, where you can plan things. You plan a major infrastructure project. So you would have to have some anticipation of it, some ability to show that it's been an issue. But this plan is to put you in position for funding, not having to wait for the next disaster.
And most of what we've identified is some sort of historical basis for identifying it, so we can make the argument.
So that when you're saying, is that basically what the vulnerability assessment would have been, to look at the current infrastructure, age and quality, and be able to pinpoint that? I didn't see that in the quick slide, so I didn't get a chance to read the full report.
I understand.
But I just want to make sure that we are thinking about the potential vulnerabilities based on our current culvert structures. Are we employing the best of modern technologies? Were they built for the 100-year flood, or are they built to some other standard to withstand whatever changes in climate may occur?
Well, if I can, so the vulnerability, the whole basis there, I think, is to find out what the probability is in a relative fashion of having a problem with all these different categories and in these different areas. A lot of these areas were in the last plan.
Right.
We also learned a bit from the 2010 floods, which actually I'll forward it to Andrew for you all. But there's that was our 100-year flood. So we went over and we did the GIS folks did the waypoints at all the different flood areas, and I have a piece of paper where it's overlaid what we thought was the 100-year flood, and they're almost exactly over each other. It was I'll send it along. It's an amazing document. And so we took such like that. We take some of the information from that, and would forward some of our recommendations. So, and I should say that Marcia drove all the way from New York someplace to be here tonight. So kudos to her.
And we appreciate that. Any further comments or questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yes.
Thanks, Ann. Appreciate it.
Okay. So now we are going to hear from the Thoreau Farm Trust.
Hi, I'm Margaret Carol Bergman. I'm the Executive Director of Thoreau Farm, also a resident of Concord, and I'd like to thank you for hearing us today. I brought with me David Owen, who is also a resident of Concord, and who has helped, he's been a facilitator of this project to what was originally to be a donation of a replica of the Thoreau cabin. But when we had looked at the deed restrictions, we saw that no other structure could be built on the property except for a barn. And so we're asking for relief, an exception from the deed restriction for 2 years so that we could have this cabin replica on our property to celebrate the Thoreau 200th. We can't think of a better gift than to have a cabin that would excite school children who live in Concord and who could, in the neighborhood especially, could walk to it, but also groups coming from out of town, sort of one stop, come to Thoreau Farm, see the birth room, and then see the cabin that helped inspire Walden, living simply. So.
All the tour guides that we had today, a place to go.
Yeah.
Isn't there a replica of Walden Pond?
A replica of Walden Pond. No. Oh, there is one at Walden Pond, but that's in Lincoln, and that is part of the state reservation.
Yes, I know.
We see this as an opportunity to increase engagement to our property, to offer more educational programming, and to also increase donations. People become more aware of Thoreau Farm. They want to support it in the community.
I believe I met Mr. Thoreau at the farm.
I bet you did. He's there every Saturday.
I believe I met him under the tree one day.
But wasn't the purpose of the deed restriction to ensure that the property remained simple and consistent with the way it looked and not being like an attraction?
I can't speak to that, but we're asking for an exception to that restriction because part of our mission, yes, is to maintain the property. And that is done mostly, exclusively through fundraising, and to offer programs to keep Thoreau's legacy alive through this century and to introduce him to more and more people, more generations. We see this as a way to achieve that part of the mission. And it's 2 years.
I see this as a temporary museum exhibit in some ways. I know that it is not in keeping with the current deed restriction, but I'd be inclined to consider this as a temporary installation for a museum.
What's
Every 150 years.
yeah, what's the date specific that it's this July, correct?
July 12th is
Right.
the birthday, so we hope to have it erected or built by July 1st.
That seems like a very ambitious schedule.
Simple cabin.
Yeah, simple cabin. And what's the thinking behind 2 years? Just
To sort of, there's expense to the builder in building the cabin and assembling it, and also to taking it down, and also to, with the 2-year period, to see it go through 2 seasons, and just, I guess, make the best use of it.
There are a number of activities planned throughout town to honor the birthday.
Roadbycentennial.org. It has not only all the events that are taking place in Concord, but throughout the world. I mean, people who know about it.
What is that website?
Roadbycentennial.org.
it's a website for absolutely everything.
Right.
I wonder what he would have thought.
It's hard to know.
Really?
It's like the Bible. It can be interpreted.
I mean,
I actually don't think it's quite a good idea. I don't see any negative. I think, it's a temporary, so I would agree. I think if it was a permanent structure that it might go against the intent initially, but I think a temporary, at this point, it makes some sense.
Then the deed should have said, except for temporary structure.
Well, they don't always think you know how lawyers are. They don't think they that well.
Yes, we do.
Does it count as an affordable unit? It certainly is an attraction, but it is a special occasion, so I don't think I'd have a problem.
I move to approve Thoreau Farms' request for a temporary waiver from the provision in the agreement between the town and the trust to allow Thoreau's cabin replica to be installed on the property at 341 Virginia Road for a period of 2 years.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Well, thank you very much. And this year, we are having free admission and free guided tours every Saturday and Sunday. And I hope that every resident of Concord and our neighboring towns take advantage of this opportunity to get to know the birthplace of Henry David Thoreau. And thank you so much for your support.
Thank you.
Well, with this replica, would you be able to go inside of it? Because the one in Lincoln, you cannot
Yes.
experience, you can't experience the cabin from the inside.
Yes, we've talked to the building inspector, and it will be built to handicapped accessibility codes, and people will be able to.
It's great.
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 Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now to plug an additional Thoreau activity, and that is the U.S. Postal Service is issuing a stamp to commemorate his birth, and there's going to be a ceremony at the Visitor Center at Walden Pond on May 22nd, where the Postal Commissioner is coming, and
That's great.
So we can go to that before our meeting.
there you go.
No, this is the 22nd, you said.
I believe it's the 23rd.
It's the
I may
23rd, yeah, I just read it wrong.
And you'll be
The
speaking.
23rd, and I'll be.
And you'll be speaking.
Thank you very much.
Exciting.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Okay, so now we're off, I think, to the reason that we are,
Bruce from the Mill Show?
yes, exactly, looking at the draft intermunicipal agreement for the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Phase 2B.
And the Phase 2B, 2A is Acton, 2B is the bridge,
or
and
not to
2C
be,
is
yes.
Concord. So So 2B relates to the design of the bridge. We were fortunate to have the state pay substantially more toward the bridge design. The bridge itself is entirely in the town of Concord, but part of the approach is in Acton, so therefore we're collaborating on the design. The intermunicipal agreement is similar to other municipal agreements that have been used with other communities sharing resources. Did you?
Pretty good.
And Marcia's taking the lead on the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, so if you do have any questions.
Okay. Nice to see you, Marcia, and thank you for joining us from New York.
My pleasure. Do you have any questions?
Did Acton have a chance to approve this?
The town of Acton is looking at it tonight also.
Okay.
And has been reviewed by the town manager of Acton as well as the planning director. It mirrors the agreement that we had with Acton for the design of Phase 2C and 2A. We were fortunate to get a state grant for all of that, and they asked one of the communities to be the lead. So Acton was the lead for 2A and 2C. Roland said, since the majority is in Concord, particularly the bridge, why don't you be the lead on this?
Well, that was going to be my question when I read the agreement. I thought, oh, well, okay, Marcia's got her work cut out for her. Just wanted to understand why. So thank you.
That's going to be some project now.
It's going to be wonderful.
Absolutely. Are there any things that you would highlight for us?
With the bridge, well, there are two bridges actually, the bridge over Route 2 as well as the bridge over Neshoba Brook, and there will be a wildlife culvert under Route 2. So those are really big ticket items.
Oh,
and that's where the primary cost is and all of that. The bridge, however, will be the responsibility of the state after it's completed, so the town will not bear that responsibility for the ongoing maintenance of the bridge over Route 2.
Both bridges.
Well, I did ask about the second bridge, but they are very close together, so I would assume they would do both.
And it's being designed to handle an ambulance or
Yes,
a vehicle?
that is correct. The state required that, the state and the fire departments for both Acton and Concord requested that it be capable of handling an ambulance, so that if there is an emergency that they can get from point A to point B. And
The bridge would be
the bridge is
the bridge.
Yes.
And remind me of the timetable.
We have to have the design completed by June 2018. It will go out to bid in the fall of 2018, and construction should start in spring of 2019, spring/summer 2019. And it has been fully funded in the transportation improvement
And it's construction period is how long?
They indicate about 2 years for construction.
And I'm just imagining the impact on Route 2, so, okay.
When you say fully funded, I assume that the extra time that you're gonna have to put in, your staff will put in, is not compensated.
That's correct.
But it's probably worthwhile having your input to make sure that it's done correctly.
And bids were solicited for designers.
Yes.
Designer has been chosen, but the contract with the bridge designer can't be signed until the intermunicipal agreement is in place.
No other questions about this? It's very exciting to see us now getting so far down the road, to be able to connect the two towns across the
And all the construction that's happening now is really.
Right, I had a chance to walk the Old Marlboro side of the beginning of, and
Phase 2C has started construction, yes, and I'd like to remind people that Powder Mill Road will be closed this summer, July and August, when school is not in session, because the road will be closed entirely, so there will be detours. That was done with a penalty clause if they fail to meet that time frame, or a bonus if they do meet that time frame. It's worthwhile to do that.
great. Do I hear a motion?
Sure, I'm happy to move to approve the intermunicipal agreement for advancement of Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, Phase 2B by and between the town of Concord and Acton as drafted.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, Marcia. Okay. I think that our patient moderator is.
That's one of the traits a moderator must.
It's nice to
Good
see you.
evening, all.
Welcome.
So, I think, would you like me to just kind of dive in here? Okay.
Sounds like a plan.
So we did I'll tell you first about attendance at town meeting, which went for 4 nights this year, and as you know, we had a special town meeting in the middle of it. We had 423 voters on Monday night. On Tuesday night, when we had the special town meeting, we had 921 voters. On Wednesday, we had 374, and on Thursday, 241 stalwart voters for a 4th night at town meeting. And all of this information is available in the town meeting update, which the town clerk has put together for us. It's on the website, and there are paper copies in the town clerk's office as well. And it also indicates the results on every article that was on both the annual and the special town meeting warrant. So I think there were a couple things that we did, aside from having a new moderator, there were a couple of things that we did differently this year. One of them was holding the entire meeting in the gymnasium as a continuing effort to figure out the best way to use the high school for town meeting. Another is we tried to let people know that we made sure that there was Wi-Fi. We let people know how to sign on to the Wi-Fi, and with Andrew's able help, we tried to upload everything associated with town meeting, including the handouts, onto the website so that they were available for people there. And in order to find out how we did with that in the view of Concord voters, I did put together a survey, and the survey was available on paper at town meeting, and people were invited to fill it out and turn it in at town meeting, or take a copy and drop it off later in the town clerk's office. Jill in the IT department put together the same survey online for us so that you could go to the town website and interactively fill it out on the town website. And the last date for getting those surveys in will be this coming Friday. But I have preliminary results. I tried to do the survey so that it has a quantitative and a qualitative piece. So I asked people to rate their appreciation of the gym as a venue, whether they could hear, whether they could see, whether the seats were comfortable, how were check-in and materials arrangements, were the snacks satisfactory, did the snacks matter, and how was our annual town meeting information on the website for those people who accessed it. I also asked a couple questions about whether people attended hearings, and if they didn't attend hearings, did they watch them on CCTV? And I asked them how important were the hearings. We've received 61 paper responses and 62 online responses for a total of 123 so far, which is actually pretty good, I think, in terms of responses. And I think probably about half of those people really took the time to write down comments and observations on the backs of the form. So we got a lot of qualitative information as well. So I will give these results to you when they're finalized on Friday, but as a preliminary matter, people were invited to select 1 through 5 as a number, 1 being really terrible and 5 being really good. So it's really useful to have a daughter who does Excel and graphs, and so she did these for me. So I have these all kind of graphically done, and I think we can see that in general, not unanimous for sure. A lot of people really preferred the auditorium. Several comments were, why did we spend $92 million on a new high school with a new auditorium and we're renting chairs in the gymnasium? But the weight of responses were, it was okay. It was okay, and it was actually preferable. And there were some bright sides on the gymnasium. It was flat. That was a good thing. And we were all together in one room, which many people felt was a good thing. So it's up to, we'll work together on deciding where town meeting is going to be next year. But it seems the preliminary results are that not unanimously, some misgivings by a not insignificant percentage of people, but the overall weight of response is the gymnasium was okay. In general, people were really able to hear. They were very, the hearing was good. The ability to see was a little more mixed. We had some complaints that the two screens were not the same. One was easier to see than the other. Many comments about how difficult it was to see things that were in font that was too small, particularly some graphs and charts were very hard to read. There were suggestions on repositioning where the screens are and how the height was. And many people were unhappy that they couldn't see who was speaking from the floor. And they're used to the old arrangements that we had where those people who were in the cafeteria were on the screen in the auditorium, those people in the auditorium were on the screen in the cafeteria, etc. And several folks, many comments were, we really want to see the speakers, why can't we have them on the screen? So that's important information for us for the future. And I've already begun the conversation with Mark Howell and the IT folks about what could we do that might be better in terms of screens, positioning of screens, type of screen, more screens closer to the back. But there will, So I think that we aren't done with this experiment yet, that we should probably do it one more time and try and work out the kinks and make a decision from there. And people weren't miserable. Some people were miserable, but most people weren't. Seating, okay, so most people were okay, and it was really clear from the qualitative comments that it really depended on where you sat. Wow. The bleachers were miserable. So anyone who commented on the bleachers said they were not fun. Many comparisons were drawn with auditorium chairs, which were universally regarded as a whole lot more comfortable than the rented chairs in the gymnasium, although many people said that, thought it was going to be worse, and was pleasantly surprised. Some people really missed their table setup in the cafeteria and their ability to bring food in and so forth. We can't do that anymore. And we got comments both ways, get rid of the tables, get more tables. So we'll think about that for the future. By and large, people are very happy with check-in tables and materials. Some comments about bottlenecks and so forth, so we'll think about that as we put things together next year. Snacks were all over the place. So people were either pretty happy with the snacks or really unhappy with the snacks. But interestingly, most people, this is the snacks don't matter column. So it seems that most people felt that snacks don't matter, and some of the qualitative comments were that you can't bring them into the venue anyway, so what do you need a snack for? Other people felt that snacks should be free and snacks should be pizza. But I think that the weight of comments were that snacks didn't really matter, and that to the extent we provided snacks, they were lousy. And there were
many qualitative comments that snacks? What snacks? Where were the snacks? I didn't see the snacks. So we also didn't do a very good job with where the snacks were located and making sure that people understood where they were. I'm not sure how much effort we want to continue putting into that, especially given the fact that you can't bring them into the venue.
Right.
So, a lot of people used the website. And of those people who used the website, these are people who were happy with how things were organized. This is people who were really happy, so we clearly have some improvement that we could make. There were some comments that the mobile app for the town website was not that easy to use in the town meeting, and most people had their iPhones. And there were some comments that people couldn't find the handouts that were on the website. I had even trouble finding them. So, but clearly we have some things to work on there. This was the first time we did this, and it was the first time Andrew was doing it, and it was the first time I was doing it. So I feel like we made that many people happy. That's good, and we can do better next time. So just to give you a little bit of sense of qualitative comments, you know, I have many pages of qualitative comments, and I've got them all typed up in a Word document, and I put together the paper ones, but the IT department put together the ones that came online, so it was great help from them. And I think we got a lot of wonderful information here, including would be nice to have clocks at the front of the auditorium. Many people commented on electronic voting and wishing that could we have electronic voting, it would really save some time. I will note that Acton is now using electronic voting, but only for counted votes.
Only for counted votes.
And so I plan over this year to look at whether we might be able to get a free trial use of the counting equipment. And if we can, I'm going to come to you and ask you if we can try that next year, see how much of a difference it makes, see how people like it, and we'll find out what it will cost, and then we can make that cost-benefit analysis knowing firsthand what the benefit would be. And we don't, you know, Acton demonstrates you don't have to do everything. You could just do counted votes and save the 15 minutes that it takes to count a vote. And one objection to electronic voting has been that every ballot then becomes a secret ballot, but it's been suggested that doesn't have to be the case. You could still ask people who were in favor to stand up and press their clickers. And then everyone who's opposed would stand up and press their clickers, and then we would also get more exercise during town meetings. Many people were unhappy with the breaks, and I will fix that next year. I've already mentioned about
Unhappy in what way? Too many, too short?
Too many breaks. Too many breaks and too long. And particularly on Tuesday night where Article 51 followed the break and we had lost the handout. So there was some additional time which many people concluded was just the moderator falling asleep somewhere and not calling everybody back for the meeting. So I think next year we will do seventh inning stretches instead of actual breaks, and if the moderator needs to leave the podium, the deputy moderator will take over for an article. And we'll just try and shave off wherever we can and increase our efficiency. Many people were really pleased to have Wi-Fi in the auditorium and really pleased to have the web-based tools. Clearly, we can still do better with the communication. There wasn't a password for the Wi-Fi, and one comment was I didn't use the Wi-Fi because I didn't know what the password was. So it may be that we can do better with the communication. Let's see. Pro and con mics, I think people were equally divided between, more pro and con mics, and other people saying this is ridiculous, get rid of them. So,
It
both
seemed like they
sides-
were used somewhat erratically
Well.
at the time that they were pro and con.
Yes, at the time that they were pro and con, I think that one of the issues was the positioning of the pro and con microphones, and some people feeling that I haven't made up my mind pro or con, so where do I stand? So I think we can fix those things, and we can have a couple of neutral, I haven't made up my mind yet, microphones, and we can have pro con in one order, and then we can have con pro in the other order, and we could do that. I still think it probably makes sense to only use pro and con microphones. We expect to have a whole lot of debate about it. And
And it wasn't used that often. I mean, I think you did it only on a couple of items at most.
we only had pro and con microphones one night, Tuesday night, and I think that it was primarily for the Junction Village article that.
You took them down, I think,
Yeah.
after that.
Well, we took them down on
Wednesday, right.
Took them down on Wednesday.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I think it does also then give you the ability to make sure that one side is not dominating the discussion.
Well, there were some comments after the special town meeting Article 1, which was the welcoming community article, where I think that when the motion to call the question was made, I think that at that point, many people who were against the article felt they hadn't had a chance to speak, and that most of the people who had spoken were in favor of the article. And had we had pro and con microphones at that point, we might have been able to balance that a little bit better, and there wouldn't have been so much of a feeling that people who were on one side of that question hadn't had an opportunity to speak.
I think it's important to have them because I think it gives the moderator more information. You know, when you're up there, as you had to on a number of articles, to try to decide whether a call to question motion was in order. You know, if you could look and see pros and cons and see, well, look, the pro line is a mile long, and there's just more information for you.
Yeah, that's right, because I think that, without that, you could say, well, most of the people we've heard from are in favor of it, but that might be that might be most of the people, so that might be perfectly fine, and there may be no problem with that. But if you could actually see people standing at the microphones,
The visual confirmation.
Yeah. Because I think that's the toughest call the moderator has at a town meeting, is when you have to decide if the motion is in order or not.
Okay. It was gratifying to see how important many people feel the hearings are, and there were many people who reported that they hadn't physically gone to the hearings, but they had watched them on CCTV. So that's important information for all of you as you're conducting these hearings. I think that they do matter to people. That people, even if you don't see a lot of people showing up, they're tuning in at a later point so they can learn more about the articles before they come to town meeting.
Have we looked into closed captioning? Because I know sometimes watching on television, it's hard to hear all the comments. And I'm
So
wondering if
my understanding is that CCTV does not have the capacity to close caption, and that's a Comcast thing. Comcast makes that possibility. They control whether that's possible or not, and it's not possible on local access channels. That's my understanding.
Do we know if that's a switch that Comcast throws, or is, having to lay cable all over?
I don't know the answer to that. I know that, I do know that CCTV knew about that, had inquired about it, and had been told by Comcast, no, you can't do that. But whether that is written in stone, I don't know, but I also don't know that there's any local access channel anywhere that's got closed captioning.
Well, it's worth looking into, and I just
Right,
exactly. Take that on.
Right, that's a great idea. I think there was one suggestion that we should put up more signs around town promoting town meeting. And well, one person who didn't fill out a survey was my husband, who also mentioned to me that, well, you know, there's these banners across the street about pancake breakfast or this thing or a Minuteman March or whatever, and how come there isn't a banner for town meeting? So I plant that seed for you to think about. That's not my department, that's your department, but it might not be the worst thing to put up a banner in Concord Center and in West Concord announcing the dates of town meeting.
Mm-hmm. A celebration of town meeting.
There we go. So that's what I have to report about town meeting. I'm really grateful to all the people who took the time to fill out the survey, and not just you know, even if they only checked off the numbers, that's really useful, but many of them went the extra step and wrote an essay on the back about what they thought we could do that would, you know, and they told us not only what they thought we could do better, but the things that they liked as well. So it was we had a lot of really helpful input, I think. And when this is complete, I will give it to you. And in general, these were anonymous surveys. There were a few people who wrote their names, and I think I'm going to, you know, remove the names, and made an effort to take the qualitative comments and split them by topic. Oh yeah, one thing I didn't mention. Many people complained about how cold the gymnasium was. It was very cold, and you know, a good, you know, 10 or so people made the point of writing down it was ridiculously cold in here. Half the gymnasium was wearing coats. Couldn't we do something about this? Even going so far as to say, if this is what the temperature has to be like in here, we can't have town meeting in here. So I don't know if there's anything that we can do about that. I will confer with the administration at CCHS. I think that this may be such a smart building, it's smarter than any of us, and we can't overwrite it, but it's worth having the conversation.
Well, it must be programmable.
Yeah,
because
it must be
even
right.
if it was a smart building, why in the world would it be so cold at that time of
Right.
night when nobody is there?
I think it was changing the air. I think it was exchanging the air.
Mm-hmm.
It was a cold day, so it was
And
bringing
the set point could be for physical activity.
Physical activity.
Yeah, so they just have to.
They can change that though.
But if the game's down and we want it cold, you know what?
we need more breaks to move around.
Laps around the gymnasium.
Exercise.
So I have one question. We received an email from a constituent that raised a process question for us, and that is whether it regards the role of town committees and boards to make presentations on articles that are presented at town meeting.
Right.
And that seemed like a bigger question to be thinking about. And for those who haven't read it, the email implies that when it gives unequal weight to the value and opinion of town committees and boards, only a few of which are elected members. So I didn't know if you had any thoughts about that comment. I think you maybe have seen it as well. My general.
Yeah. So I think that we have elected officials and we have a whole series of appointed committees, including the Finance Committee, Planning Board, West Concord Advisory Committee, and many other boards and committees that have very specific charges, where it is their job to become the experts on certain areas of importance to the town, and they are appointed on behalf of the town to examine issues that are within their purview and make recommendations to the town that they feel are balanced and in the best interest of the town. And for that reason, it certainly strikes me that that's important and valuable information for all voters, because these are people who are charged with acting in the best interest of the town, doing investigations. These committees and boards are cross-sections of the community, generally speaking. They take public comment as they come up with their recommendations, and they make recommendations, and they're of some utility to voters.
I also felt that the time was to provide information rather than to perform an advocacy.
Mm-hmm.
And the advocacy were 2 minutes. I mean, if you had somebody who made the proposal and the select board was in support, we had 2 minutes of support, the same as somebody who was speaking against it. So I thought that that was a misguided email, frankly, and I thought missed the point that it was very important. And I think something like Junction Village, there was a lot of information that had to be provided, and I think swayed a number of people. And I think that that's very important to allow sufficient time so that information can be provided, because it's not everybody who goes to town meeting, in fact, comes to these other meetings and gets the information. There's often misinformation out there.
Yep.
So I think that while I think that that feels to me like the right approach is to have on the factual, and just as Tom says, that it's factual stuff as opposed to advocacy, from the perspective of various different boards and committees who have a different purview. And it's the unusual article that fits within the purview of so many different committees. So you don't usually hear from 5 committees, but once in a while you get something that it hits affordable housing, it hits open space, it hits finance, and then you hear from everybody about this. So it's the unusual thing, and I think that it's very reasonable for a person who's opposed to the idea to feel that the deck is stacked against them when all those boards and committees have made the same recommendation, and they're coming with their recommendations and various facts. So it is, it troubles me from a process perspective if people are feeling that the process is not fair, in terms of the adequacy of debate or discussion or information because of that structure. But I'm not sure, for me, anything that you do in any individual instance needs to be part of a broadly applicable principle. And exceptions need to be well-defined and, in my view, few and far between. For that reason, it's probably worth thinking about whether there is some broader process issue that we should redefine along those lines.
Well, it is the case that there isn't surprise at town meeting when boards and committees get up to speak to the facts, but from their perspective, because all of that's been already discussed at those boards, at the hearings.
Right, and not only that, but every board and committee has to arrive at their recommendation in a public meeting, and they take public comments. So
and they wear a specific hat.
Right.
Natural resource opines or offers fact on a particular project based on their worldview. obviously the finance department, the finance committee also does that, where they look at something in a very, narrow but important framework along with financing a particular project.
Right. So Junction Village was one of those kinds of articles that touched a lot of places, so that the CPC was involved because of some of their money. The select board was involved. The Concord Housing Development Corporation was involved as their sponsored project. The finance committee had a point of view, and then there were all kinds of people lined up at the microphones who also had whoever it was that wanted to come and have something to say about it. So
yeah, and it's numbers of citizens attending the town meeting as well, because that last night, it's such a smaller group that if all the committees there that night were all kind of at the front, you're a pretty big percentage of the of voters. So.
That's true.
And even I think on Junction Village night, the turnout wasn't that large for that. I think the vote was in the 300, 350 range.
Right.
So, and all those committees were making statements, so I don't think it was, I think it was all the right people were there to give their view of that particular article, but I don't know how, I don't think the turnout was as many people as I thought.
Right. There were some complaints about the schedule this year. Some people felt that, why was special town meeting on Tuesday night? And, and why was Article 51 this high interest article? And why did it have to follow the special town meeting warrant article? And
I was going to compliment you on how it was done, because it was spread out. And so it wasn't kind of all on one night. And so different groups could attend if they were only going to attend one or two on the particular issue. And it seemed to me we had pretty good discussions on pretty much every night.
We did, and every night we had one article that took us over an hour.
Yeah. Right, exactly.
I think it would be odd, given the way we've organized town governance with professional staff and citizens committees, if in fact citizens committees weren't talking at town meeting on articles that would be.
Right.
I mean, what is the point
of having
a citizen committee governance structure in your town? So, and I don't think having somebody, whether it's pro or con from a committee talk, forecloses anybody else from talking.
No, it doesn't. It's just a question of how much time is allotted to each point of view, and it was commented upon that I allowed certain individuals to run over their time a little bit here or there. No, not naming any names, but
well, I ran over 28 seconds. I apologize to the town meeting because I had a cough and I had to speak more slowly than I normally would. I would have hacked my way through the presentation.
My one criticism, I don't think that the lighting system in terms of when you are talking is a very effective one. I'd much rather have a timer in the back with the digital so you can actually see how much time you've spent. The little blurb down there, you're talking to the audience or you're reading something. I didn't find that to be...
Use a basketball scoreboard.
Exactly. But it's like in football, the quarterback can see how much time...
there is a little countdown clock that's in the corner of the screen, and that's on the floor in front of the speaker, so that was not useful.
I didn't see it, but to change to a compliment, I thought that the traffic control by the Concord police was extraordinarily good. How quickly people were able to get in and out was really amazing. And I kind of expected it would be like commuting into Boston. You'd be sitting there forever, and it just wouldn't work. They did a terrific job, and I think they should be complimented.
Yeah, I agree completely. And they've done this for a couple of years now, where they had everybody on one driveway, parked on both sides, headed out.
Right.
And then they closed that one for entrances, and it really
flow
helps.
You got that down.
Yeah, we did, of course, have a few qualitative comments that there's just not enough parking at the high school.
Well,
You can't please all the people, can you?
no, that sounds like something.
I was not wild about the decision to use the gym, as you might remember, but I thought it worked out really quite better than I expected, and I suspect that it really is worth doing it again in there and trying to improve some of the things that you heard in your survey. I thought it was really quite good to have everybody in the same room. I thought that was a very positive community building activity.
So this is really about the experience for the community, but I would say that uniformly the staff found it much easier to do the staff jobs.
Yes.
From one room than splitting into 3 rooms.
What is the capacity? Because I did notice it was pretty crowded the one night when we were.
So we had hoped
being
that
a
the
welcoming
capacity would
community.
be 1,200, and it ended up being a little short of that. So the capacity was 1,100 and change. So a little less than 1,200. But you know, on Tuesday night we didn't get to 1,000. It was under 1,000, and it's still difficult because you know people don't push into the middle
They don't
and
go to the front.
right. So
Yeah.
it was difficult to get people to distribute. So maybe one of the lessons there is that on those evenings when we do expect a big turnout, that maybe we begin asking people to push to the middle, and that maybe could be a job that tellers could do as well, to just remind people that we're expecting a crowd. So if they could, and of course not everyone wants to do that. They might want to sit on the edge because they know they're going to leave early, they know they need to get to the bathroom, they know they
There
want
aren't
to get
going
to
to
the
be any
microphone.
breaks. People aren't going to be wanting to be in the center.
There you go. So any other thoughts that the board has about
Well, congratulations.
Yes,
That was a
Absolutely.
great-
Thank you very much.
I think you had absolutely every procedure to have to maneuver and mediate
There
through.
were a bunch.
Every
There
one
were a
of them.
bunch,
Yep.
yes. Yes,
Very
and
well
it'll all
done.
be better next time.
But I think the tone of the whole meeting was really a very positive tone. I mean, even the people who may not have gone their way felt that they had the opportunity to hear, you know, speak their position, and that everybody did have a chance.
Yeah. Well, I think that, you know, I really did want feedback, whether it was good or bad. And there certainly were some constructive criticisms, but they were in the distinct minority. So I know that there were some people who were a little bit unhappy with how process went on articles that they were particularly interested in, but by and large, people were content.
Thank you again.
Great.
Thank you also for doing
Thank
this
you.
survey.
Thank you, and I will send you my survey when it's done.
Great, thank you.
Okay, well, now it's our turn to review town meeting and reflect on our next steps as a select board, or following up. I did a quick scan through town meeting and came up with a few. If I've missed something, please jump in. The first item that I noted was Article 48, the special election on home rule, as well as the regional high school's landfill remediation borrowing, which is going to require an election on June 8th. We all scheduled for that and moving forward.
It has been scheduled. I think the arrangements, the balance been approved. So publicity, I think there's more
Yes,
to do.
that
with
was sort of
publicity.
where I was. I want to make sure that we give everybody a chance to come out to the polls. Then we had Article 1 at special town meeting. Chris, I was wondering if you could prepare the appropriate forms as administrative policies. And obviously, when they're completed, they should come back before us for discussion and vote. Is there anybody in the select board that is particularly interested in investing in that?
Yeah. I'd be happy to work on that.
Thank you. Okay. And then on the other high interest article, Article 51, on, Chris. You also get.
Yeah. Well, we're in the process of drafting a position description or job description for the energy director. Not a lot of them out there, so we are reaching out outside of Massachusetts actually to see if there are positions that will help us. That has to go before the personnel board. We have to classify the position within this. So it's a little complicated to get it ready to go. I know there's a lot of interest in that, but in order to fit it into our system properly, we need to go through this process. So then, and I believe the desire was that we hire the energy director first and solicit proposals for the energy plan when the energy director is on board, so that the energy director helps in selecting the consultant that's going to work with the town on setting it, laying out the plan. Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Yep. So we won't wait till that person arrives. I think we can start putting together the RFP before that person is selected, so that when the person starts working, the bids will be coming in or that sort of thing.
We might re-engage with the folks in Lexington.
Yeah, which I haven't done.
Yeah.
And Alice, you and Mike were.
I definitely would have an interest in following up on that one. I'll share it with you.
I'm happy to help if I can.
Okay. And then on, we had it was not a motion, but it was a discussion of an administrative policy, which emphasizes Concord's public lands. And I know that you were very active in early discussions on that.
Yes, I'm happy to work with the petitioner. And once we've got some draft language, I'll give it to Chris so he can, help me put it in appropriate administrative policy form, and then bring it back.
Okay, great. And then we also had, we saw an amended Article 49 pass, which has the select board appointing a committee to study the affordable housing goals of the town and recommend appropriate measures to fund those goals. Who would like to step up to the plate on that?
Steve, Charles
That's Charles looking at Steve.
Yeah, well, Steve has been our guru.
Our heart and soul of affordable
exactly.
I'll say though, between, I think maybe just Jane and I, but we've received a number of notes from citizens willing to
help with that.
Help with the committee, beyond the committee and the like, so
I would hope that there's going to be kind of a broader base. I know there was a suggestion at the town meeting that the members of this new committee be kind of all the people who were advocating for affordable housing. And I think it's important kind of that we have a broader based group, because I think you want to get all points of view on that. It's not just a sort of it comes at some cost. It's important that those trade-offs be analyzed.
Yeah, I think the committee would be a balance. It would have obvious representation from those folks who have responsibility for these kinds of activities, and then citizens. Rather basically got the town involved. So I think it's just striking the right balance. You certainly wouldn't want to leave a committee or an organization out of this that's got real responsibilities for doing it.
Yeah.
The range of skills that would be useful on that committee. There are a range of skills that would be useful to that committee.
Knowledge of affordable housing, finance.
But I don't know how the coordination with long-range planning as well, because there is some feeling that it's a broader issue than just a one-time.
I suspect the Committee on Concord's long-range plan is going to have a piece of many things coming in front of it. I suspect that was a general statement by folks at town meeting. We heard that echoed across the board. So what did I miss? in my quick perusal.
I
I'm
think
looking at
there's
you, Tom,
clearly
and I'm
the-
thinking.
The one issue is going to be, the committee is now going to be voted into being a council, and how that transition takes place, what's required, is there, any.
The commission, disability commission.
Yes.
Right.
And whether, is there something required to comply with the state? Do we have to get the whole different group to come in and to fill out green cards? Is there kind of a transition
I think you have to, I would recommend that you have revise the committee charge.
Yeah.
And that was part of the vote, I think. So I think you'd have to approve a committee charge. I don't know that you'd want, if you have active members, I don't know that they need to refill, they just confirm their interest in serving on the commission. But,
Well, so Tom, that sounds like homework for you.
Yes.
So we should review section 8J to make sure we comply with that.
Yeah.
Is that in our language of establishing a commission?
Yeah.
Okay. I trust you know how to
Again,
read those better.
The one issue is also on the, I'm not sure exactly, but on the, Mr. Andrews' motion, Article 20, which was the money in
Yeah,
politics.
money in politics, right, following up with our legislature.
I think we have some affirmative responsibility to draft something to them,
Right.
telling them what town meeting did.
Exactly. Maybe that should be on my plate to move forward, unless there's somebody eagerly interested in taking it on.
Hearing none, I think you're deemed to be the.
Congratulations, Madam Chair, you can take that one.
So, is that a good summary, folks?
I think so.
Go ahead.
I'll just mention that we will have to file, the town clerk will have to file with the Attorney General the bylaw changes, the zoning bylaws and
Okay.
the general, so we'll have to, and then the access easements, there were 3 on the MBTA, Brookside Square, and W.
All right.
Race. I'll bring those to you, but they will
Right.
require action.
Okay. Thanks.
So the clerk does zoning.
Yes, and the general bylaws as well.
Okay. So, with that as our follow-up, I think we're on to Balls Hill Road. Our deed conveyance, do we have?
So do we have the paperwork on that? The town voted to acquire the property, and now the deeds, portion of the land is being conveyed to the Public Works Commission. They're voting on Wednesday, I think, to confirm that. So I don't know if you have any questions on the documents.
Any questions from the select board? Because I think
Confirmatory
we've been there for a
Yeah,
while.
we've discussed this quite a bit.
Do I
Ready
hear?
for a motion?
Move to approve the conveyance of 22.06 acres shown as lot 82 and parcel 82.1 on the plan of land in Concord, Massachusetts, recorded as plan number 1128 of 2016, sheets 1 and 2 from the Select Board to the Natural Resource Commission for conservation purposes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. I move to approve the conveyance of 11.03 acres shown on parcel A2.2 on the plan of land in Concord, Massachusetts, recorded as plan number 1128 of 2016, sheets 1 and 2, from the Select Board to the Public Works Commission for water supply and conservation purposes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So one thing remaining on Balls Hill is the conservation restrictions. We have to, the board needs, they had to go through the state, then they went back to the NRC, and now the last step is the board, and we need to have that done in order to get the $400,000 grant. And I think Delia set a deadline to try to get it all done by June 1st, so that we absolutely make the real deadline of June 30th in order
So
to
that
get
is-
that.
So that would be in front of us on the
Hopefully the 22nd.
22nd,
I
okay.
think she's coming in.
It's a big meeting, right?
She's coming in for other things, I think,
Yes.
that night as well.
Coming-
She's coming on the 5th for the.
Oh, is it, so I'm
That's
sorry,
right,
we're gonna try to
the 5th is the
combine.
NRCs.
So maybe we'll do it on the 5th, we're gonna
That
try
would,
to.
then we wouldn't miss that.
What's the deadline?
The 30th of June.
She wants everything done by June 1st to be sure that we get the paperwork filed with the state before the real June
1st, so
30th.
then we only have
So-
May 22nd.
Right.
So she'll
So
be
you may-
at
you
2
may see her
meetings.
twice.
She'll join us 2 times.
There's a small hiccup on this though, and that is that we had begun to have a policy that we would hear about these restrictions twice.
True. Yep.
Haven't we heard about it once before?
We talked.
Yes, they were circulated. There was a draft before they went to the state, and then I think the state made some tweaks. I don't know if you know anything about that, Marcia. No, I think the state, which must approve them, made some minor changes. They've gone back to the NRC. I think the NRC has voted to approve them, so now they come to this board.
So
It was-
I guess an affirmation that whatever tweaks were made by the state were minor.
Right, they were-
substantive.
correct.
This could be our second meeting.
Yes.
On the 22nd.
Yep.
We all could do it on next week from Tuesday when we're doing meeting with Henry Dane as well. But
I'll see if you.
That's true.
That's
see
enough time.
If we're ready for that.
Sure.
That's something-
Okay, we
Great.
can add that to the agenda.
But the 22nd will give her enough time to
Yes.
do with that.
Right.
Yes.
She had planned.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So, I think we are done with our volatile piece and on to liaison reports. Oh, I'm sorry. How did I jump off of that? Wow. Is there any public, oh, there we go. Mark.
That's what made me think
Ah, yeah, no.
You're doing a
Somebody
long
in the
time
corner.
tonight.
No, I enjoy public holidays.
That's okay. So my name is Mark Galis. I live at 62 Prescott Road. Thank you for this opportunity. I want to comment on two things. Firstly, I wanted to say I thought the town meeting was extremely well managed and very well moderated. It felt very even-handed. I think, given, some of the various things being discussed hotly, it felt very fair and open. And my wife Tanya asked me to say that she feels very much that way too. The second thing I wanted to do was I wanted to apologize to the select board for some unfair and harsh comments I made during the discussion on the amended version of Article 49. I was, personally upset. It's nobody's fault, but I was personally upset to have the discussion of the original amendment, rough-hewn as it was, carried out further to bring out more citizen opinions and also kind of, brought to a vote, and I think it would have gone down, but it would have sort of made a certain point. Because I don't think I'm the only citizen that feels that with regard to affordable housing, the town has not taken a comprehensive, coordinated, thoughtful approach to it to the extent that it should. And it's been kind of piecemeal, and there's always this 40B kind of sledgehammer type thing being brought up, and that I think it should be one of the last things that's thought about. It should be, coming from other advantages and other purposes and other goals, and we shouldn't necessarily be focusing on that particular statute's definition of affordable housing as what we really think is right. So as a little bit of a compensation, I want to highlight 4 points I heard in the discussion that I think might be useful in terms of thinking about composition and the charge, et cetera. One thing, and let's see if I can remember my point. One, maybe not in any particular order, but somebody was. Hold on a second. I know I should have written something now. Several interesting things were said, and one thing I heard was that it would cost something to do it in various ways. Another one was it should be fairly allocated, the burden across the community. Another one was talking about different groups, as was sort of discussed here just recently, that have interest in it, but not really coordinating together, et cetera. Now, my first point, if I can only remember that, then I'll be done. Anyway, maybe that's enough. But you kind of get the drift. I think that this is a very important thing to be proactive on, and a tremendous amount of input, I think, and thought is necessary, and I think it deserves it. So, thanks. That's enough.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Well,
Mr. Galis, also feel free, if you get those thoughts, just email me.
Yeah, yeah,
I'll be
I'd
happy
like
to
to-
talk to you about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
appreciate it. Any other public comments? Seeing very little of the public. Okay, now we're on to committee reports, or liaison reports. Any interesting meetings that have, let's see, want to start?
I had a meeting with the Council of Aging this evening, which was interesting. There was a discussion about some of the changes in healthcare in the state that may be taking place. There was talk of developing kind of a community network system where the aged might have people that they can call and trying to set up kind of on an informal basis. They were very appreciative that the special election was put off because of their having an appreciation day at Harvey Wheeler that day, which was the reason the select board changed the date. And they were very appreciative of the town making that accommodation. And there was a discussion about coordinating with the long-range planning. So it was a lively, interesting meeting. I think there were 10 of them there, so that it was well-attended as well. I did not attend the Bruce Friedman Rail Trail, which was on last Thursday night, as well as the Star Commission, that they did meet, and moving right along.
I attended the White Pine Advisory Committee, and there remains considerable concern about how quickly the Bruce River Rail Trail development seems to be moving along, and that there's some concern about adequate protections for bikers from accessing the pond and the new trails that are being developed along the embankment. The town is beginning a great deal of work on bank stabilization, and there's some of the trails have been are being upgraded, some are being moved to new locations. There's going to be new development of the corroded stairs. So you're providing good access for people to walk to the pond without impacting the environment. So there's a lot of good stuff happening, but there are still concerns. I will expect that we will receive at some point a request for ongoing water quality monitoring at town expense. And I offered that we would hope to meet and always achieve state water quality standards, and that it doesn't require yearly monitoring, that we should set multi-year goals. So we'll see where that comes out, but we can expect to see a request again. We do have a meeting, I believe, scheduled for this Friday to further discuss Wet Pond.
Well, I attended the NRC hearing last week, and probably the most robust conversation we're going to hear a lot more about tomorrow night, or Thursday night, which is further discussions on Estabrook Woods. This will be specifically about dogs, but there was a lot of conversation about the plans that the NRC now has put forward for parking in Punkatasset, along Punkatasset, the entrance there, and multiple members of the public were there, predominantly abutters. So nothing was decided, it was just the start of the discussion. I don't know whether or not those plans are on the website, but I suspect they probably are accessible. I haven't checked. And I also wanted to put in a plug for Wednesday night's open house for the West Concord Advisory Committees. It's their annual open house. I believe it starts at 5:30 at the Harvey Wheeler Center. And it sounds like the agenda is really to do a pretty big overview of all the different projects that are moving forward or at different stages in West Concord. And there's a lot going on.
Is that a public open house?
Yes, it's their annual open house.
5:30.
5:30, yep, yep. So, that's all for me. So I think we've got some committee nominations. Who would like to?
I nominate Richard Gauthier of 35 Hubbard Street to the Hugh Cargill Trust Committee for a term to expire May 31st, 2020, as well as Lindsay Howard of 6 Loring Road to the Library Committee for an unexpired term to expire May 31st, 2019.
Second. No, we don't need a second. Right?
Not for nomination.
Yeah.
All right, and, I believe the next one is to appoint Director Carol LaFleur to the Minuteman Neshoba Health Group Board of Directors. Who would like to?
I move to appoint Finance Director Kerry LaFleur to the Minuteman National.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Would you like to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. What?
We could put that letter from Guardian has to go on the path.
Well, I want to make mistakes, as in not having spoken to.
You gotta push it.
Right, hopefully we'll-